everybody? Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and we have a little bit of new information to work with. Is it a lot of new information? Not really, but at least it's new information. Of course, when we only have a little bit to talk about from the news side, that means that this show is very much open to your questions, and I'm turning it over to you. Whatever you want to ask, draft, off season, around the NFL stuff, fire it up here because we've got a lot of time before the draft to answer your questions. And intern Clay is standing by. He has done a first ever for an intern on this show. He's done a full first round mock. So we're going to go through intern Clay's mock. I texted one of the previous interns and they were very jealous that they did not get their own mock. So it is a first for Clay, but he has earned it with all of his hard work. I have put together 5 or so quotes from Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's press conference today that stood out, at least to some extent, for me. And we also have one that I want to play you, which was my question to Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. So we will get to that right off the bat. The big takeaway is that every pre-draft press conference that I've ever done, the general manager does not reveal their pick, but there were times in the past where every once in a while, Rick Spielman would say something like, yeah, I mean, it is a pretty amazing draft for running backs. And we're like, oh, is it? And then they draft Dalvin Cook. But I think Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, a few times when he was attempted to maybe pin him down on a different position, kind of wiggled out of that. So it's a fun little cat and mouse game that we play every year. But we did hear from the general manager today, at least, and there were no questions about Aaron Rodgers. Remember, I promised you guys that there would be more press conferences and we would ask about other stuff. And here we are, nothing even about his contract situation, which we will wait and see till after the draft. Wouldn't make any sense to ask about it now. Of course, he's not negotiating his contract in the final moments before the draft, but we moved on to lots of other subjects. So I've pulled some quotes to read from you, and I also have this one to begin the show when I started off the press conference by asking Kwesi Adofo-Mensah about the big subject: will the Vikings trade down?
Trading down is a big part of the conversation. There's a bunch of different trade value charts that people have invented. I guess, how do you view that challenge of picking the best player that's on the board versus the idea of picking up more draft picks by moving back?
Yeah, 2 separate questions and a great one. I'll start with the first part of that, just draft strategy. A lot of times it's impact, and that impact can be one great player or multiple good players, also realizing that it's uncertain and you don't know necessarily for sure that the one player is going to be good and all those different dynamics. So that's really the conversation you have. Right now at this point in the draft, we try and make sure our board is correct or in terms of how we view things. You got to prepare yourself. You're picking 24th. You better be able to call 24 and have 24 names that you're willing to stand up and clap and feel great about. So that's the first and foremost and the foundation of how we build this thing. The trades and all those things, scenarios, they come. Moving over to the charts and different valuations, it's a difficult exercise. It's something that I've been fascinated by. I built a chart myself. I've seen other different charts, and they all take different assumptions that, or quite frankly, this is a hard exercise. How do you value a great player in a great position? You could assign a number to it, right? When you assign that number to it, does that incorporate the scarcity of that type of player? If you don't get that player in the draft, you can't typically get that player in for agency. So how do you put a number on that aspect of it? It's and different people have different ways of doing that. And I've seen people in San Francisco do it, in Cleveland do it, myself, all the different things. And you appreciate the different methods. I think the best thing you can do is understand why each chart is built the way it is, and kind of maybe for each decision you make, understand kind of how you're using it for you and kind of go with that chart value there. It's a great question. It's a fascinating thing. I don't know that anybody's going to solve it because, you're trying to assign a number to a thing that's not really perfectly.
So there you go. I always think that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is at his best when he is speaking philosophically about the way that decisions are made in the NFL. And that was, I think, a great answer to point out that there are a lot of different draft charts that we'll use to evaluate his trade down if he makes one. And we'll say, well, by the Jimmy Johnson chart, it says that they lost the trade. Or wait, by this Rich Hill or Spielberger and Jason Fitzgerald or whatever. When you Google draft value chart, you're going to find 5 or 6 of them that have different values and different methodology to figure out whether your team won or lost the trade by those point systems. But ultimately, I think the word that stuck out to me so much there was scarcity. And I've talked about that a lot on the show. When we go through all the different Vikings scenarios, one of the things that I put a focus on is how hard is it to get one of those guys that's really great at position X, Y, or Z? So you might say, how hard is it to find a safety? And the answer is not that hard in free agency. But you look at defensive tackle, well, that's actually very hard to find in free agency. Corner might be a little bit easier, as we saw the Vikings last year build a cornerback room for a top 5 defense using free agency after Mekhi Blackman went down. Even Byron Murphy was a free agent a couple years ago, and then Shaq Griffin and Stephon Gilmore. So they might view corner as being something that isn't as scarce because you can go and find those guys. And there were 4 or 5 corners that we talked about, the Charvarius Ward and the DJ Reed, that might have been available if the Vikings couldn't get Byron Murphy back. It makes me think about defensive tackle, and it also makes me think about whether guard is one of those positions, because I do think if you're going to get an elite guard, you probably do need to draft them at the top. You think about Trey Smith, who's been an elite guard for Kansas City. They didn't let him walk out the door. The Quentin Nelsons of the world don't get allowed to walk out the door very often, but the Vikings also were able to go out and get Will Fries. Probably had to pay more than you would normally pay Will Fries. And, the Aaron Banks thing we've made fun of with the Packers paying crazy money for a guard. So that position may have moved into this conversation where 5 to 7 years ago, we would have said about a guard, oh, no. That's a position you should find anywhere. Get your Joe Berger or whoever, your Brandon Fusco, and just throw them in there and they'll be fine. But I think the league has changed for the amount of talent on the interior. And suddenly teams are gripping on to their few good guards that are really good. And they're paying those guys a lot more than they used to. So guard might actually fall in that category. And this is a major part of my wide receiver argument is most of the top rated wide receivers from last year and most productive guys did it with their own team. Those guys get signed unless there's a real reason why you don't want to sign them to a big extension. So when he talked about that scarcity being baked into the discussion, it makes me think that as they break down their scenarios, they have, if it's this player at this position at 24, we've just got to take him because you got to make sure you get the best you can. But if that player in that position isn't there, then maybe it's a trade down to look for something else. But trying to pick apart the pre-draft press conference, always tricky. I just thought him going through his thought process and how he tries to solve these problems sort of shows you the important role that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has in this entire thing, right? We think of a general manager overall as being someone that manages the player personnel people, the coaching staff in some ways, and all that, and the front office side, and works with the coaching staff. But I think what he brings to the table that's a little different is a lot of those questions because of his analytical background. I don't know how many GMs, maybe they should all know this, but I don't know how many GMs could tell you they built their own draft chart and they understand how those things work. Or are most GMs just working off it saying, well, we've got a chart and someone gave it to me. So I think his understanding of those questions is next level for general managers. And whether that helps them draft all the best players this year, I don't know. So let me get to a few other quotes from Kwesi Adofo-Mensah that stuck out to me. I wrote them out instead of grabbing all the clips because I want to read them. So let's start with this one. He said, "You earn the right to be the type of organization that drafts for impact and not for need. I think we were able to do that in free agency and things we've done the past couple of years to build to that place." So that's another one that we've talked about a lot on the show about all the different options that the Vikings could potentially have in the draft because of what they've done in free agency. And the way that he phrases it here, I think is correct. Like with your roster building, you earn the right to be able to say we can look for one impact player instead of just having to take whatever it is that we need the most. And that, as we're trying to put on our gumshoe or our Sherlock Holmes and look at every single word and say, well, what does that mean? I think what that means is that there might be players at positions that we don't necessarily have as the number one need on the roster, and that they would be willing to take because they're doing it for impact. The other thing too is when he says that you draft for impact, I thought comfortable not trading down. That's what I thought. Because if you're talking about need, a lot of times it's not just one position, it's sort of a volume of need. In 2022, one of the reasons that they traded down to get all those extra picks was because they had a ton of needs. They needed everything for the future. They were so old and so expensive in 22. They needed rushers, they needed corners, they needed guard, they needed safety, they needed linebackers. Like, oh my gosh. And I think when Kwesi said not that long ago that he was trying to solve every problem with one draft, like you could see it in the way they went about it rather than drafting, I believe they were 12th in 22, rather than just drafting the best player at 12 to get the most impact. If it was this year, they would have just drafted at 12 and not traded back. And so there's a little bit of maybe a hint there of, hey, look, we've earned the fact that we could draft at 24 and look for the player who can give us the best impact because we don't have to go out and hunt a need. And I think that's absolutely true. On to the scarcity thing, a little more on that later in the press conference. Kwesi said it's about scarcity of the thing. It's going to take 4 years for a certain position, but if you don't draft it, you're not going to get it anywhere else. That's got to factor into your impact calculation. I read that as defensive tackle. I mean, we know that maybe he was talking about quarterback. I don't know, because quarterback, but I don't think quarterback takes 4 years. I think that pass rusher is the thing that takes maybe the longest to get figured out for players. And that's not just my guess. That's some of the PFF research that it was done in the past by Timo Risky, one of their data scientists. It showed edge rusher was the slowest to develop. It also says guard, because we've talked about this, that guards don't start to peak until year 3, sometimes even year 4. Defensive tackle, and Kwesi later used the words dark arts of rushing the passer. And I think he was talking more about Dallas Turner and how he's going to have to learn and continue to learn to beat offensive tackles. But defensive tackles can make an impact right away. But if you look at even a Milton Williams, Levi on Wazirki, the things that some of those draft picks did that were maybe second or first or third round picks, a lot of them did not come to fruition till their second, third year of really true pass rushing. And I think that even about Dexter Lawrence, like I don't recall his exact sack numbers for his first couple years, but he was certainly good early in his career, but now he's like the best player in the league. And it often takes some development for that position. Well, that's something where you could say, hey, it's going to take a couple years for that guy to reach his peak, but we can't just go out and get another one in free agency. And I very much think that's the case about the defensive tackle position. So what have we got so far? Our investigation has led me to they're drafting Derek Harmon. I don't know, but I'm trying. It's hard to say based on this press conference, but I'm trying. Okay, here's some more that lead us maybe to defensive tackle. Maybe. Kwesi on the safety position said, we bring back Harrison Smith, being able to sign Theo Jackson and have Josh here for another year. We get continuity and communication on the back end. Jay Ward's another young player that we have there. We're excited about being versatile. Now, he did go on to say we're always looking at our options, but does this quote knock down a peg the safety position? And I understand what I'm doing here by trying to use these quotes that you can't really, but why not? So if we're just using these quotes and trying to figure out what they'll do, what they like, what they don't, so far I'm landing on stick and pick at 24 and take a DT, right? Take Kenneth Grant, take Derek Harmon. But even when you mention pass rushing, like, Derek Harmon. So anyway, but the safety position is an interesting one because where you could go back and forth is we haven't seen Theo Jackson play a lot of football. everybody who's watched Theo Jackson or played with him is high on Theo Jackson. He had a phenomenal training camp, and I can tell you, like, it means something if somebody has a training camp that good. It almost has always correlated to have it that good over the years into that player becoming something. Now, there's always the training camp hero who we give Mr. Mankato and is the 5th-round pick, and that doesn't always mean something. And sometimes it does. Sometimes it turns into Stephon Diggs or Adam Thielen. But if there's a guy who is playing first and second team reps, who's consistently making plays and in the right position, and they're talking about him, they're going out of their way to talk about him, their teammates are talking about him, it usually means something good. And especially if they pay him, it means something good. Now, it's not a guarantee that this paying Theo Jackson and him getting the mention here and them talking about the communication and how good it is in the back end, it's not a guarantee that they won't draft a safety because Metellus is under contract for 1 more year. Harrison Smith is, TBA, but maybe 1 more year here. And Theo Jackson will be here for multiple years. So there is a little bit of now and later to a safety pick, but those are also fairly young players outside of Harrison Smith, and they could re-sign Josh Metellus, and just throwing Jay Ward into the mix too. Jay Ward's someone that I will have my eye on, as we've seen the Cam Bynums and the Josh Metelluses after a couple of years start to blossom in that position. And Jay Ward was very good on special teams for them last year. Does this make me lean a little bit away from the safety position with him talking glowingly about that and throwing out the fact that they re-signed Theo Jackson? Maybe. Ever so slightly. Ever so slightly. Not completely, but ever so slightly. Okay, 2 more quick ones. Kwesi said, I can say, this was on the experience that they've had together over a couple of years and evaluating what they've done in the past of the draft. And trust me, enough of you have brought it up that they've missed on the 2022 draft. They have brought in some successful players from the other drafts so far, but in volume, they have not had big hits. Of course, Addison, Ivan Pace, who for me, undrafted free agents are part of a draft class. And, JJ McCarthy, of course, is a big one, and we'll see what happens with Dallas Turner. But we have looked at the draft as an area that they have not been as successful as the free agency, where, they brought in so many players that have worked out. So just regarding what they've learned about working with each other, Kwesi said, I can say to somebody, these are the odds if something happens, and I can look at them in the eye and say, hey, remember this conversation we had 3 years ago and how that went. There's so much you learn from that shared experience together. And this is why a lot of times when the whole Kwesi can't draft thing comes up, like, the first draft that they had was very different than now the 4th draft that they have. The circumstances are different, and I'll always point to the luck element of it and just say, man, I mean, Lewis Cine had a 99th percentile relative athletic score and was an absolute beast at Georgia. I don't know why he didn't work out. Stuff happens. But at the same time, maybe there are things that they should have identified about Lewis Cine or about their process or whatever it might be. And I think that experience is one of the reasons that you want the leadership to continue together. Because the longer you have, this is like a quarterback in an offensive system, the longer you have a front office working together, the more you know the strengths and weaknesses, the longer you have a coach and a GM work together, the more you understand how each other views the world. And I think that Mark Wilf is right on when he talks about wanting this leadership to go forward, and we'll see how this all plays out. They have 4 picks. So I don't know how harshly we're supposed to judge it if they take 4 players, but at the same time, I think that's overall a good thing and maybe speaks to the growth of the front office in general. And one more thing, that pesky backup quarterback situation that you guys love so much. He said, it hasn't only been about the comp pick situation. What does it mean? It hasn't only been about the comp pick situation. What does that mean? I don't know what that means. Could it mean a trade? I think maybe I think it might mean that they are looking into trade options. Now remember, the backup quarterback that they had over multiple years, Nick Mullins, they got him in the middle of August. They might just run Brett Rippon and an undrafted free agent all summer, and trade for somebody in the preseason. You can do that. It's fine. Or they might have a handshake deal with Carson Wentz. Also fine. So there you go. There's your update. Questions, comments, thoughts. We'll have a good conversation here. And Clay is standing by. He is so proud of his mock draft. He's got a mock. He's pumped about it. I haven't even looked. I've tried not to look at it because I want him to just reveal it at the same time so we can all rip apart his mock together. So we'll do that in a little bit as well. Let's start off with Man Juice here. Why not? What a place to start. Kwesi in 22 didn't get as much value as I think he could have got from his trade down. Do you think he's changed in that way? Well, it always depends on who you ask when it came to that trade down, because, well, number one, you may think he could have gotten more, but if he could have gotten more, he would have traded for more with someone. I think what happened in 2022 was that he was dead set on trading down, that it was hell or high water trading down. No matter what, we're not staying at 12. We're moving back. We're getting more picks. We're taking more swings at it. Overall, there are plenty of charts analytically that liked the trade down. And then there's the traditional Jimmy Johnson chart that did not like it. Personally, I did not like it because I think you draft Hall of Famers in the top 15. That's what all the evidence says. And we talk about impact. But that's the thing. When he says you earn the right, at that time, they didn't have the right to draft for pure impact, or at least he didn't see it that way because they had so many needs, for the future that he felt like he needed to stack draft picks. But I also think that at that time, everybody and their brother knew the Vikings wanted to trade back. And so no one was going to say, here, we'll give you some humongous haul in order to let you trade back. They were, trying to get a deal, and Detroit got a deal. Now, had Lewis Cine worked out or Andrew Booth Jr. worked out, we would look at this completely differently. Those were two good prospects. They were drafted. Booth was drafted way after he was projected, and Lewis Cine was drafted around where he was projected. And that's the randomness element that I'll always go back to. And look, if the Vikings had stayed and they picked Jordan Davis, he's okay, but I think he's kind of just a guy at that position. Doesn't play anywhere near as much as some of their other defensive tackles. So I don't know what he would have done here. Maybe he's Delvin Tomlinson. I don't know. And a lot of those picks on the offensive line are busts that went there. If they picked a corner there like Trent McDuffie, it would have been talked about as a reach, and he would have turned out to be pretty good. But of course, Kyle Hamilton would have been great for them, but then maybe Josh Metellus doesn't play. So I don't know. That's what makes the draft so interesting and so baffling and beautiful. But I think when he was going into it, and this is why this year is different, when he was going into 22, locked in to trading down, that's maybe how you make a mistake. And the previous regime did the same stuff, not with necessarily trading down, but locked into, we have to get a center. We've got to get our zone blocking center. We've got to get our tight end for the future because Kyle Rudolph's not happy with his contract or something, or the Gary Kubiak offense needs another tight end. And so you pass up on some good players because you're locked into that spot. This year, they are not, which is good for them. Go Wolves says, rank these left guard options in order: Zabel, Booker, Jackson, Savania, and Tate Ratledge. Well, Ratledge is probably going to be the last one there, just because he's not projected by anybody to be a top pick. He's probably going to be a third rounder or something like that. Savania is kind of interesting because he's freaking massive and he moves well for a tackle that's that big. I would probably go the order that you have them: Zabel, Booker, Jackson, Savania, and Ratledge. I'd probably go in that order. But if they take Jackson in the first because they love his movement skill, I'm not going to be like, how dare you? I don't know. Whoever they think is the best fit is fine with me. Booker, he feels like someone who has the maturity to grow and the upside to grow into that body. Zabel is a little more of a development curve than Booker, who is more NFL ready and can grow on the fly. Jackson, I think there's the red flag in Jackson for me is just the numbers. That when he played guard, his numbers were just okay at Ohio State. When he played tackle, his numbers weren't all that good. Sevenaya Ratledge. Ratledge is a really great athlete. Ratledge might be the guy you take in the third round, but I mean, each one of them, they all have something that is good about them and something that maybe you have a little bit of a concern. So, Kyle says by Kwesi's press conference, seems like another stud DT would be the ideal pick. Hey, that's exactly how I was reading it too. When you talk about scarcity, I think, well, what's really the position that's the most scarce in the NFL outside of quarterback? And it's probably defensive tackle and wide receiver for guys that just do not make it to the free agent market. Wide receivers, man, if you get Justin Jefferson, he is not leaving your building. If you have Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, those guys don't go anywhere. But, there are other positions. Guards is one of them. Corners, one of them, where safety, they're out there. Linebacker, they're out there. And you can get them in free agency. And maybe the gap between whatever linebacker you're going to bring in versus somebody else is not that much. So defensive tackle, along with him mentioning the development curve, definitely was striking me there for sure. Let's see. Kyle says, I don't care how far we move back, but it would be great to get 4 top 100 picks. Really odd draft. Picks 16 through 55 have solid starters. Yeah, it would be great if they had more picks. That's true. So I was looking back the other day, just trying to figure out, okay, what could they really get back for some sort of trade back? And the best I could do was maybe they could add a third or something like a fourth and a fifth by moving back a little bit. So you have to decide whether that's worth it. Of course, yeah, 4 top 100 picks would be great for them. And I was even talking to someone today for an article who is in the league, just asking him about this whole trade down thing. And the thing that I ask everyone in the NFL that I know is it real this year? Because we always hear the middle of the draft, and that sort of thing. And the answer is yes. I've gotten that from, call it multiple sources, if you want to call it that, from people in the NFL that are involved in drafting processes, not necessarily with the Vikings, but I just tend to ask everybody at the combine, at the owners' meetings, whoever I can get my hands on, is it real? And one person said, they always say that, but I think this year it probably is more than ever that pick number 40 versus pick number 24 just may not be that different. It may be almost a matter of preference for a particular team. Overall, though, the league is good at this. The top picks always outperform the lower picks every single year, every single draft, outside of outliers. So you don't want to move too far back to get more picks. But if they could move far enough back into the early second and completely ruin our first night of draft coverage, into the early second to pick up another third and have something like number 40, number, 97 and number 105, let's just say. I think you could get players who could be contributors at that. You'd like to get even a little bit higher, but I think that the thing about a trade back when there's not a quarterback involved or there's not some big run on a position, maybe there will be, is that the return is not going to blow your socks off. It's not like anybody's going to trade from number 40 to number 24 and give you a first rounder for next year or give you the whole rest of their draft. They're probably going to throw you a fourth and a sixth and say, be happy with that. So they have to decide whether that's worth it. What I was hearing a little bit in Kwesi's voice is not sure that it is. Not sure that it is. Randall says Zabel's the only guard I'd stick and pick at 24. That has been my favorite pick for them, is Gray Zabel, because I think the upside is extremely high. The physicality is impressive from him. The way he performed against top talents at the Senior Bowl, I think, was pretty telling. And the physical upside, the actual raw athleticism of Gray Zabel is really impressive on paper. I mean, somebody who you would put in the very high 90s percentile instantly in the NFL at the guard position, and then with flexibility to being able to kick out to tackle if there's injuries or to play center in the future. I like all of that. But, right away, it might take some time, but they can also do that with the fact that they have a veteran starter right now in Blake Brandel. Jake says, Zabel is worth 5 players to me. Wow, you are a Zabel guy. He can fill in at a high level at every position for need or injury. He's not the most fun on draft night, but he changes this team significantly. Well, I'll tell you, for this fan base, a guard who has a mullet or whatever. Does he have a mullet? I seem to remember a mullet. But a guard who, maybe it's just a mustache. I'll have to look back at it. A big old guard who could potentially be the last piece to an offensive line that, if he's the pick, would be the best offensive line the Vikings have had since 2009. I think for this fan base, that there would be a celebration. I think it would be the most fun for these fans. I mean, all of you have watched that guard position just be problematic for so long. And look, it's problematic in 25 NFL cities where it's not perfect. And they change guards every year because it's tough to find these guys. But it's been beyond just, hey, it's not that great, but the guy's fine. It's been downright awful for so many years. And I think it got better last year with Reisner once he came in. But even the previous year, I mean, how about 22? You're starting at Ingram and he's leading the league in pressures and Kirk's getting his ribs broken and all that stuff. It's like, what's happening here? So if they were to draft Zabel, and there's the potential for finding a high-end left guard to go along with an expensive right guard, an expensive center, and 2 expensive tackles, you couldn't try any harder to build a great offensive line than they have. So I think there would be a lot of excitement for that. Aaron says, 1 week to go. If they draft a wide receiver, people will say, what are they doing? Just like we did last year with the Falcons drafting Michael Penix. I am always looking a year down the road with the draft. And teams that look right in front of their face often make mistakes because of desperation. And if they were to draft a wide receiver, a year down the road is when you start negotiating with Jordan Addison, for one, but also a year down the road is when you're expecting to compete for a Super Bowl with your young quarterback. I think this year we're a little bit on the, like, hey, they should be in the playoffs. Then we'll see what happens. We'll see kind of where everything stands, right, with JJ McCarthy. And that's the goal, is to make the playoffs, and you got to win, and you should win in the playoffs. But a quarterback starting his first year, we're still going to have some leeway there. But in his second year in 2026, you're thinking that this is where you chase the Super Bowl. And if you have Jefferson, Addison still on the last year of his contract, another wide receiver in there, endless weapons for him to work with, Hawkinson, I like that. I like that projection. That's what the Falcons last year, they looked at it and they said, look, we don't know how Kirk Cousins is really going to look. And once they found out, they went, thank goodness we drafted Michael Penix. But they were looking a year or two down the road when they made that draft pick. And you're right. People, I think non-listeners to this show will be like, what are you doing drafting a wide receiver? But all of you will know that there's a lot of logic behind it. I don't think they're going to do it. I think that the defensive tackle right now would be my first guess. Or, trade down and maybe take a corner who drops. But, defensive tackle would probably be my first guess right now, or guard. But if they do the wide receiver thing, it'll be cool for all the listeners of this show, at least, because you've listened to me rant about it for so long. Go Wolves says, I read that comment as Deion Walker. I think you're talking about the 4 years of development. Deion Walker, he's one of those where, did he really drop or not? Because after the combine, all the analysts dropped Deion Walker like a stone to the bottom of the lake. But I don't know if that means that the NFL did that. Or if they did, maybe you're looking at a 3rd round pick for Deion Walker or something like that. I mean, he still is a big, giant dude with really freaky movement skill. And he might be the one that ends up being undervalued by the outside that put more emphasis into that combine than everybody else. Alex says, do you think that teams will try to take advantage of Kwesi knowing he wants to move down in a perfect world? No, I don't think so. I think they're going to move down if they believe that they can still get the player they want. So if they look at it and they're bored and their expectations for their 100 simulations, 100,000, whatever they do, their expectation. I'm sure they've built a mock draft simulator, and there was an article today in The Athletic about teams using the mock draft simulators and stuff and reading the mocks and all that kind of stuff. And they should, because they want to have an expectation of where other teams are going to go when they get there. So if you arrive at 24 and you look at the next 5-6 teams and you go, look, nobody here is going to take Malachi Starks. This team wants this team needs that, this team's been projected 70% of the time to take this guy, right? Then, well, you could trade down. But if they think that someone else is going to take their guy, they'll just stick and pick. I think also, too, that everybody at this point knows that teams want to trade down in this draft, and it's just a willingness to do it or not. And there's probably no real taking advantage of somebody. I mean, you could look at maybe 22 sort of like that, as well. They knew that he wanted to move down, so he didn't get the best offers. But in this case, they don't need to do it. They can take that draft pick because they're not dying for more and more players on the roster. They've got players on the roster. What they're looking for is to get a difference maker. Rob says, I'm a process analyst by trade. Okay. Initially, I thought it was 80-20 that they would pick at 24, but all of their due diligence visits are rated between 30 and 50. So I've changed to 80-20 trade back. Okay, well, that's interesting. Maybe, though, let me just throw this out there as part of the process in your analysis is rated between 30 and 50 by whom? Right? I mean, it's by the mock community, but the mock community will even admit that in this draft, it's harder than ever. I've seen people have Maxwell Hairston, for example, the corner from Kentucky, being taken by the Vikings or being taken in the middle of the second round. The same thing for someone like Siobhan Ravel, who did visit the Vikings, but I've seen him taken in the first in these mocks. I think more than ever this year, they are having some trouble figuring out where that back end of the first and second are. So there might be someone who is between 30 and 50, but in their world, that person is a first round draft pick. There's a few players that I've heard, well, this guy, the media loves him, but the reality, he's not that high. Or, just for example, Kenneth Grant, I've heard the opposite, that there are teams that are really high on Kenneth Grant and that he probably won't get to 24. But if you do the PFF mock draft simulator or whatever, he's there. So there's a lot of different ways to look at that problem of trading back or not. The other part is too, if they don't have someone visit, it doesn't guarantee they're not picking him. They might have a top 15 player and they don't have him in for a visit because they don't have any questions. A lot of times they bring in guys they have questions about. You would bring in Jordan Addison because you might have some questions about Jordan Addison, right? And then we go, well, they have every player visit that they draft for 3 drafts. Like, I don't know if that's enough to really qualify. Maybe it is. DOD says, I did a mock trading up and then I received trade offers and traded back to get more picks. Well, this is the thing about the mock draft simulator is you can hack that thing. So the video game, Ken Griffey Jr. Baseball, came out in 98. I still play it sometimes. If you trade for a player that's ever so slightly better than you, but you add a random free agent to it, they'll do the trade. So you could just keep trading up and up and up and up till you get Ken Griffey Jr. on your team. And the PFF mock simulator is kind of that. You can just slightly win every trade and then end up with a ton of picks. And, I don't know if it's going to work that way in real life, but trading up is something that, if we're trying to address every single potential option, they could look at maybe 1 or 2 spots and dip into next year if they want to get a really specific player. But that is funny though. Trade up and then trade down, 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 down until you get 37 picks. Yeah, we have definitely reached the point. You get a neck roll for that, by the way, because you're hacking the PFF simulator. But we have reached the point where that's a new one for options for the Vikings, and I'm impressed. I'm impressed that we could get to this point and have a new idea, but them trading up and then trading down many times to get as many picks as possible. That's a good one. Randall says, Harmon is the one DT who really knows what he's doing pass rush wise. Yeah, I agree with that. The reason that I like Derek Harmon so much is because of the data. When you look at the defensive tackles in the NFL, and I did this the other day, I went through guys that were drafted since 2018. I thought that was the most relevant data. I looked at their last college season and how much they produced in terms of pass rush win rate and PFF pass rush grade. Almost all of them were over 80 grade or upper 70s. And some of the best, like Jalen Carter, were up around 90. And that's where Derek Harmon is. I mean, it's not just winning in college, it's dominating in college on the interior. And I think if, that is a good correlating thing, which I think it is, then you should go for someone like Harmon because interior pressure is an absolute cheat code in the NFL, as you saw in the Super Bowl. But you've seen it every week. You've seen it every week when the Vikings have these bad guards. But we always blame the guards. How about credit to the other teams? The team that drafted Kenny Clark or the team that developed Grady Jarrett or that, right? Like they deserve credit too for having guys that can absolutely maul the Vikings. Most weeks, if you think about it this way, most weeks, those bad guards over the last how many years have been okay. Probably 60% of the weeks they're okay. When are they not okay? When Akeem Hicks is there, when Kenny Clark is there, when it's some beast. And now there's more beasts than ever, but the Vikings have not had one of those on their side in some time. Let's see, K Foul 77. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. What if they traded up for one great player? So here's the funny thing about trading up. And now they would have to reach into next year's draft capital. Maybe you could make that argument. But if we looked at this on the draft chart, the draft value chart, if they used all of their draft capital to move up, they could only get to like 16. That's how little draft capital they have. So they would have to go into next year, and I would not be a fan of going into next year. That would not be my choice. I think they need to continue to try to reload. Blowfish says, does Sam Howell have a coaching connection with Josh McCown? Not that I know of. I guess Sam Howell is a fine backup quarterback. He definitely falls under the category of I don't really care. I mean, he's got some experience. He's been pretty terrible. I don't know. It's the same as anybody else. Same take as anybody else. But that might be one of the things that Kwesi is talking about when he says it's not all about the comp pick formula, is they may have somebody in mind for a potential trade that they want to get through the draft and then pull off that trade. That is an option for them. Sam Howell does have a strong arm. I will say that. But if he has to play a full season, you're probably not making the playoffs like every other backup. Zach says, am I crazy or do we have everything we need? Mostly, yeah. I mean, if they ran the roster out today with no draft pick whatsoever versus after they draft, do we feel any different about the win-loss total? Not really. So they have built a very complete roster that even has depth at multiple positions. I mean, we're talking about wide receiver, but Jalen Naylor was an impact player to some extent last year, at times last year, and filled in pretty nicely for Jordan Addison for a couple weeks. And if you look on the defensive side, the cornerback room, you could add to the cornerback room. But if you don't, are we going to go, oh my gosh, what are they doing? No, we're not, because they signed Isaiah Rodgers and they were able to bring back Byron Murphy. So yeah, I think that they are in a position where they have everything. And that's why he said you earn the right to just draft the best player rather than needing to go draft something. Go Wolves says, what are the chances that the Vikings draft Jalen Walker or Jahad Campbell to play inside linebacker if they fall and make Pace a rushing only linebacker? Pace is also very good against the run. One of the higher graded against the run. So, he could do multiple things, but the chances are okay. I would still have it pretty far below almost anything else that we've talked about, the guard position, the defensive tackle, but I think it is a wild card. So I've been trying to consider wild cards. Like what if we're shocked on draft night? How could they shock us? Probably drafting a linebacker would shock us. But then when you think about it, they miss time with injuries because they play so physically. And you have the defensive coordinator that's so good at this, just so good at saying, all right, if it's Jalen Walker, by the way, I saw a little of Jalen Walker's workout being shared around on the internet. That guy's not making it to 24. That guy is a beast. But Jahad Campbell might, and he is a little bit of somebody brought up Anthony Barr. Maybe that was for Walker, but a little bit of that can pass rush really well, high IQ, good in coverage, but isn't an edge rusher. I think Jahad Campbell is that. Maybe he's just like a Blake Cashman. Remember, Blake Cashman was talked about as somewhat of an edge rusher coming out of college, and instead he's turned into this all-around linebacker. Well, if you had two of those, that's worth its weight in gold. And Ivan Pace can rotate in. Yeah, I mean, that's the point about it's really hard to find a position that you think, what are they doing? Some of you have made the tight end thing. Okay, maybe that's the one I would go with. I would just fundamentally not draft a tight end in the first round, probably ever. But there's very few positions where you'd say, what are you doing? And so if they could get a Walker or a Campbell, I think Walker's going to be gone in the top 10 probably. But Campbell, I'm intrigued by the idea of pairing Blake Cashman long-term with someone who has that much talent and IQ and kind of create two little Blake Cashmans out there and have Ivan Pace be a joker type of player that you could do stuff with on third down or on run specific downs. I mean, the more talent that you can run out there, and players get hurt all the time. We always do this with the depth chart. We're like, well, that's all set. But if you go one spot down, for many years, one spot down has been, all right, it's virtually unplayable. And now they're not in that position. So Blowfish says what didn't help Scene outside of his severe injury in London was the emergence of Cam Bynum. He was drafted, then not needed in the first expect. Yeah, you're right. That's one that's going to be picked apart forever. It will always be kind of amazing to me that it didn't work out in any way at all, because it's not, see, this is where it's not really just the emergence of Bynum, because if Brian Flores wants to play you, he'll find a way to play you. And he was throwing out Theo Jackson instead of Lewis Cine. Personally, I think that, and this is not like Lewis didn't tell me this, no coaches told me this. This is just my theory. I think some guys come in with an attitude that they're the man. Like I'm the guy. I'm a great player and we're going to do things my way and I'm going to show up when I feel like it and I'm going to put in however much work I feel like I should put in, and I got the bag as being a first round pick. I got my money and I'm the guy. And you either figure out how hard the NFL is or you don't. Theo Jackson, just for example, I had, 15 minutes chatting with Theo Jackson last year for a story. And what you immediately get is great attitude and really smart guy. And a lot of times in the NFL, the skill sets, how fast you are, it's pretty close. I mean, Theo Jackson was like the best player in the state of Tennessee coming out of high school. That's how good everybody is in the NFL. So a lot of times it's, how do you work? And do you have a humility about you to learn from everybody else? Because Durante Jones told me last year, he called the cornerbacks the four horsemen. It was Bynum, Smith, Metellus, and Jackson that would all sit in the front row of the meetings and all talk to each other. And imagine you've got your chance to ask Harrison Smith anything you want because he's right there next to you, like the Hall of Famer. Right? And a great coach like Durante Jones, if you're not asking those questions, if you're not engaged in those meetings, if you're not going home and studying every single week and putting in way more work and trying to really learn and understand how this all works, it's just not gonna happen. And I remember, I think Matt Daniels let a little bit of the cat out of the bag with that, because he said something like, for Lewis Cine, he was asked about him in year 2, and it was like, yeah, he's learned a lot about how to be a pro, show up on time and things. It's just like, okay, I think we understand kind of what happened, but also I won't discount how traumatic that injury probably was for him. And sometimes with injuries, we will just assume it's only physical, but it is a scary thing. And this is why I've said before, you have to be a little bit of a sociopath to make it in the NFL. There has to be a little bit of this, nothing breaks you, because an injury like that can really break somebody. I don't know who wants to go back on a football field after that. But at the same time, Jordan Hicks, dude, almost could have died with an injury. The guy played like 5 weeks later. He's crazy. I mean, really, really great dude to deal with as a reporter. But you got to be nuts. Oh, you got to be insane to have an injury like Jordan Hicks did. And then not everybody's insane. So there's a lot of different reasons why it might not work out. When you look at the logic of it, a safety, didn't love that positional value for sure. But I mean, look at his production, look at his performance for Georgia. I mean, there's just that's how the draft goes. I was just watching the 2020 draft back for an article, purpleinsider.football. Go check it out. And I was just doing a rewatch and I was writing along with watching it. And it'll just blow your mind, some of the players that were picked before Justin Jefferson. The Miami Dolphins took a tackle from USC that no one was really even sure was a tackle. And not Justin Jefferson. Like, if they knew anything, then this would be so much less fun. Ron says, I'd be satisfied with Zabel, Donovan Jackson, Calvin Banks, Walter Nolan, or Derek Harmon. Calvin Banks is a wild card that we never really talk about because we expect him to go higher. But if the NFL doesn't see him as a tackle, it just, Daniel Jeremiah the other day was saying that he feels like Calvin Banks is going to go super high. But you never know. If he's the guy that drops, maybe the Vikings make him into a guard. Zoomer Kev, what is your general strategy for drafting prospects? Do you lean towards high floor, safer picks, or more towards boomer bust? I don't really ever think of things in that exact terminology. I think of it as more of, this is just for me over the years. What does it sound like when I hear the smartest people talk about a player? When I hear the Dane Bruglers, the Daniel Jeremiahs, what does it sound like the risks are? Because I think it's the risks that get you or are more accurate than it is the upsides. So sometimes they'll say, well, this guy could do this in the NFL. He could be that. He could be so great at this or that. There's no guarantee of that. But a lot of times it is the downsides that get someone. Well, he is a little slow with his processing, and you're like, there you go. And so over many years of studying this, there's certain things that will ping for me that, oh, hey, like the draft analysts are saying this about a guy. That's pretty concerning. And that would make me lean a little bit farther away. So Will Johnson is a good example. Well, he wasn't really a good tackler. And you're like, how many guys in the NFL in a zone league can just be bad tacklers at corner and be great corners? I don't know. That's pretty concerning. Oh, well, he's got great instincts for picks, but he gives up big plays. How many guys, 6 picks, led all corners last year? There's 17 games. What do you mostly have to do? You see what I'm saying? Like, this is kind of my process. And then I've just really focused a lot on what the data says. I mean, so I look at, and that's been really good for me over the years of just looking at, well, what did the guy do for performance in college? Because performance is the number one indicator of success in the NFL. Nothing is a 1-to-1 correlation. Nothing's even close. But if you're going to look like who becomes the best players, production is the most. So when they draft guys without production, I'm always going to be a little down on that. When they draft guys with certain red flags or certain criticisms from the experts, I'm going to be down on that. And the opposite goes. This is why I like Derek Harmon so much and Jahdae Barron. The numbers, and when you listen to those guys talk, you're impressed. They're talked about as high IQ people. Like, those things tend to translate pretty well. So it's not the craziest philosophy you ever heard, but kind of my own thing after a lot of years of doing this. Aaron says, try to get one of the top 3 defensive tackles, Harmon, Grant, and Nolan. Why not go get one of the best guys from a loaded DT class? I agree. DT is the position where I would say, man, they probably got a guy who's going to be here a long time. If that even slightly works, this guy's going to be here for a long time. And I would probably like it the most for a stick and pick out of all the positions. I'd probably like defensive tackle the most for a stick and pick. Rob says, what about Ursary at guard, 6'6", 330, moves well enough. Sounds to me like he's a tackle, like that he's not a guard. I asked Jeremiah Searles the other day about him because the Vikings brought him in. I also think the Vikings bring in everybody who is local, just to have a conversation with him, get a look. But I don't think that guy's a guard. I don't think there's that explosiveness, that physicality, that power. I don't know. I mean, maybe he is, but I don't think so. I think that he is more of a tackle, and someone will pick him in the second round to be that. James says, now that you have all but the last week of information before the draft, what do you think the Vikings will actually do in this draft? We want the on-the-record prediction. Well, I think that I think they'll do the thing. I think they'll stick and pick the thing that we were talking about earlier, and they will draft Derek Harmon. That's going to be my prediction. I don't know. Could be a lot of people. That's what I love about this year's draft. Could be a lot of people. There is 15 different guys that if they drafted, I'd be like, oh, okay, that's not surprising at all. But that's what I'm going to go with right now. Matt says, I don't think any of the wide receivers this year are good enough, but I'm sure I'll talk myself into it if it happens. So here's the thing about the wide receiver class. I was just talking to someone today, wait for it, in the league about the wide receiver class. And what I was told is that there's a lot of Jordan Addisons, but not a lot of Justin Jeffersons. And I think that sounds good. I mean, is that worth a first round pick? If Egbuka is a Jordan Addison type, a number 2 wide receiver, if there ever was one, and you have 2 of those guys, that sounds really good to me. That sounds like it's worth it, because what do number 2 guys get in the free agent market? They get $30 million. DK Metcalf to me is a number 2. I don't know that he's a clear number 1. I mean, I think he's more of a number 2. And he got $30 million. How about T. Higgins, $28 million, clear number 2. So the surplus value is worth a lot. Rob says, rated by the consensus board, Harmon, Amos, Ravel, Jackson, Connerly, or you decide. So are you talking about the guys that they've had in for visits that we were talking about earlier? Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of those guys that if they're on a consensus board at number 30, that doesn't mean the Vikings won't love them at 24, right? I mean, that's what I mean, is that consensus board is not the truth. It's not the facts 100% locked in, the absolute flawless truth about the draft. All the time, there's situations where the consensus board thinks way more or way less of a guy and is a million miles off. So we don't know what, and I like it as a tool and I love it as a conversational tool. But if they bring in someone like Ravel and the consensus people have him at 37, that doesn't mean that most teams in the league don't have him as a first round pick. You know what I mean? Like, those gaps exist with certain players. And sometimes if somebody goes against the consensus board by 3 picks, what are they doing or something? Like, come on. Grateful Dad, 78, says, Kwesi and his team has only gotten better every year since 22. Our GM is going to do his thing next week. The best thing about where they've put themselves is that even if things go sideways, they are still in a position to compete. It would be much better if they hit on this draft, and I think their process has gotten a lot better. I mean, it's not probably talked about enough with Kwesi Adofo-Mensah that we were talking about somebody who was not traditionally brought up in this game as a general manager in waiting. He was an assistant GM in Cleveland, but it wasn't like he had done the whole scouting and slowly come up the ranks and everything else, and had never really been in a leadership position before. So now, 3 years into a leadership position, is probably in a better spot to make better decisions with the people that they have. But that doesn't guarantee anything when you have 4 picks. Guns Donovan, love that name. Is that a character in a show, or is that your name? That sounds like a fullback or something. Maybe you just get a neck roll for being named Guns Donovan. I think the reason they haven't done another contract yet for Kwesi is they're waiting on this draft and see how he deals with the quarterback situation. No, I don't think so. I love your name, but I don't think so. I don't think that okay. If you were waiting on this draft with 4 draft picks to decide whether you're going to sign him to an extension or not, then you're nuts. And one thing we know about the Vikings ownership is they're not nuts. They're pretty logical people. Mark Wilf was extremely clear at the owners' meetings. He sat from me to my computer away from me and said, we want Kwesi Adofo-Mensah to continue to lead this team in the same role that he has with the same power structure as he has had going forward. There was no wavering. There was no, we'll see how it goes. It was, this is what we want to happen. And anytime it's gone that way with them, where they've been definitive, we want Justin Jefferson back. We want Kevin O'Connell to be our coach. They have made that happen. If I had to take a wild, crazy guess at the holdup for Kwesi signing a contract, you'll never believe it. It's probably about the money. It's probably that they're in 2 different spots about money. And it's only a guess, but it's a pretty easy one to make. If they love the leadership structure and they won 14 games last year and they love where they're at and they think they're ready to compete for a Super Bowl within the next 2 years with JJ McCarthy and the roster and the free agency, what would be the only holdup? I mean, it's one of the healthiest franchises in the league. It crushes the NFLPA survey. And there's been a lot of people on the outside who have tried to say, what does Kwesi even do here? And what's going on? And I honestly think it's because people are pissed off that the Vikings get praised so much. I think they want something to be there. And I also think a lot of people wanted Kwesi to fail. I don't think that. I know that. I've been told that there were a lot of people in the league that didn't like that Kwesi jumped the line, and they've been talking crap about him for years. And so when has that ever shown itself, by the way? When has that ever shown itself in the moves and the things that have been made? I'm sure internally there's politics the same way there is at your job. I'm sure there's power battles. I'm sure there's things where they go, what is even going on with our manager? You know, that exists everywhere in the NFL. There's people who some do or don't like inside front offices. Clearly the Vikings have someone who's a little bit of a problem at chatting from the inside about like who they're talking to, i.e. Aaron Rodgers, or, hey, do you know they considered Malik Neighbors and sort of rumor mongering out there. That's clear they got somebody who's doing that, but none of that stuff ever seems to come to fruition. So I think that the ownership is happy with how this is going because this is what they want out of their franchise. They want their franchise to get A pluses from the players. They want their franchise in the playoffs, competing for Super Bowls. They want JJ McCarthy as their quarterback and big free agents to sign here. What ownership doesn't love that? When you get 8 free agents to say, we want to come to your franchise, talk about how great it is. You're going to have to show me where there's any sort of reason to make a change or think that they're, well, like if they mess up this draft, then he's out. Like what? After they won 14 games and no, that's not how it works. It's probably just this. If you've had as much success as they've had, your agent representative, your Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, who's been rather busy this offseason, probably is saying, here's where the top GMs are making their money. We belong there. And the Wilfs are probably having a conversation about where they actually want to put that number. And that's what's going to happen. And eventually they'll get it done and we'll all kind of laugh at the storyline. And look, I could be wrong. But that's how I think it's going to go, is they'll get it done. And then we'll all say, well, that was silly that we wasted so much time talking about it. That's my guess. And if I'm wrong and he quits after next year, then that'll be kind of crazy. Anyway, Josh says, if the Vikings do trade back, say 5 to 8 spots to get another 3rd rounder, who do you think they would pick in rounds 1 through 3, at least position wise? A good position to trade back is corner. Because the Trey Amoses, the Siobhan Revels, they are projected to go in the 35 to 40 type of range. And there's 3 or 4, Maxwell Hairston, 3 or 4 guys that you might be pretty happy with in that spot. So you trade back 8 spots and you go to 32 and you could still draft Hairston or Revel or whoever you want. And then in the 3rd round, you can look at whoever you think is the best. I mean, there's some defensive tackles there. Guard is not a bad position to draft in the 3rd round. because a lot of, third round guards are quickly developing into, somebody who could play. Safety in the third round might be something you look at. Wide receiver, certainly in the third round. Those guys from Iowa State, Higgins and Noel, are both really good. And every time I look at like their profiles, compare them to Burden, compare them to Igbuka, I'm like, those guys are pretty good. Like they should look into those guys in the third round. They'd kind of go wherever they want to go after that. But I think corner would make the most sense for me if they traded back or if they felt like maybe a Tyler Booker was still going to be on the board. All kind of depends on how it plays out. Sir says, is the Samuel rumor mostly solid? I don't know. I think it's a little too good to be true. I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, I've seen that there's a rumor about Asante Samuel, but if they signed him or have an agreement with him, they'll announce it at some point. So I don't know. I haven't asked him about whether he's coming here or not. It makes sense that they would have some handshake agreements with players for the comp pick formula, but is Asante Samuel earning enough to mess with the comp pick formula? I don't know. I guess we'll see. And you always have to consider, where is a rumor coming from? I don't know where the Asante Samuel rumor is coming from. So, if it's a rumor, then I'm always going to, if it's not a report, and if it's a rumor, I'm always going to kind of just shrug my shoulders. Like, sure, that sounds like a fine idea, but is it happening? I don't know. I guess we'll have to find out. Shaq Griffin, a possibility to return. Maybe, kind of depends on what they want to do there at corner. I think they do feel pretty good at where they're at with the corner. Let's see. How do you pronounce this? Frida? Is it Frida? Sorry if I got that wrong. It feels like smart players are much less likely to bust than physical freaks. Is that something that bears out in draft results? Sometimes. So this is the hard thing about smart players. If someone is very clearly talked about as a high IQ player, I think there's a pretty good chance that they can succeed. If they're talked about as a leader and a high IQ and really, really smart and understands the game and all that sort of stuff, there's a pretty good chance that they're at least going to figure out a role, even if they don't become a star. However, this league is kind of run by physical freaks. It just is. The Myles Garrett's, and I'm not saying he's not intelligent. I think he is, but like, it's run by the physical freaks a lot of times, the Aaron Donald and so forth. And sometimes when someone's a physical freak, their intelligence can be not discussed enough. I think that's maybe a bias there. So just take Danielle Hunter, for example. Danielle Hunter's a smart guy. I know this. I covered him for a long time. He's a smart guy. And he's got incredible work ethic. Very unique cat. Like, loves a lot of different kinds of music, cars, and all sorts of things. Very interesting guy. Quiet, though. And sometimes quiet guys who are physical freaks can be talked about as if they're not that intelligent. I'll give you another example. Christian Darrisaw. Christian Darrisaw is very quiet, and he's a chill guy. He's very relaxed. People in the league thought, this is what I heard, that people in the league thought, this guy just doesn't have an edge to him. And he does when he plays. He certainly does when he plays. So trying to just judge it off of that can be pretty difficult, but I think it maybe sets a floor for somebody that, like, they're going to find a way if there's high IQ there. Nothing's perfect, though. And a lot of physical freaks will go at the very, very top. And if they bust, we'll remember them. But I think in the middle rounds, the physical freak versus high IQ is probably a different conversation, because if you're a physical freak and you get to the third round, there's probably a lot of questions and a lot of problems with your game. Whereas the high IQ guy might get overrated a little bit because he's, smart or a leader or whatever. Such a fascinating thing, eh? Seth says tight end in the third round isn't crazy considering Josh Oliver is in his last year of his deal, though I bet they re-sign Josh. I don't mind that. I don't love that. I like drafting tight ends in the fifth or undrafted free agents and seeing if they develop. And they're just around all the time in free agency. They're just around, You see them a lot that they'll just be available in free agency, and you can go sign an average one. You can sign a tight end too. There's still a couple guys who can kind of play. Dallas Goedert is maybe a potential trade. So, I don't know. Uh, Tight end is one of those positions that's so hard to predict and project because it takes 2 to 3 years of development. So the unfortunate part about Nick Muse being poached is that he was probably ready to take a step into that role. And then, another team comes and gets him. But it really does take that long for a guy to develop at tight end. So I kind of like the idea of drafting them later, seeing if they develop, and then go into free agency if you need to. But this team does love Josh Oliver, though. They love themselves some Josh Oliver. I wouldn't be shocked. The offense could change a little bit, but I wouldn't be shocked if they do, like you said, just extend Oliver. The tight end thing is kind of the farthest thing from my mind. Maybe they'll get one in the fifth. Randall says, your comments on Lewis Seen sound like the rumor and innuendo around Nolan. Walter Nolan, I assume you mean. Talent, but work ethic and maturity is a question, McShay and CBS guys. So analysts have questioned his maturity. My thing on Walter Nolan is when I hear that he's going to sack people more often and going to pressure the quarterback, but you can't really show me that he has at an elite level in college, I go, little worried. Now, if the Vikings get him, he graded unbelievably well against the run. If the Vikings get him, they'll put him in a favorable situation. And okay, I'll just believe in the strength and the quickness and all that sort of stuff, and we'll see how it goes. But if you're giving me the choice between a Harmon and a Nolan, and maybe there are some questions about maturity, but for me, it's really a data question of one guy was a completely dominant college pass rusher who got after the quarterback all the time. And the other guy, I'm told to guess that he will do that eventually. And I just have a little more questions about that. Aaron says, I remember a story about Pat P watching tape and how smart he was. I remember Harrison Smith the same way. Great mentors for the young DBs. And that's how you get a megastar, is when those things cross together. Patrick Peterson and Harrison Smith are two of the smartest people you'll ever meet. And they are geniuses about football, just flat out brilliant. Oh, yeah, by the way, Patrick Peterson was a freak athlete who returned punts for touchdowns and stuff. And Harrison Smith is a great athlete when he comes out as well. Very natural athleticism. Maybe didn't run the fastest 40 at the biggest size, but just really, when you have the intersection of that, that's when you get superstars, is when they're free. But yeah, Patrick Peterson was very, very smart. And I think that it does help with younger defensive backs. And that might be one of the reasons that they think that a guy like Dwight McGlothern or Mekhi Blackman can be good. It might be a reason to not draft a corner because they think that room is going to always get the most out of guys. Could be. Grateful Dad 78 says no linebacker in the first, but at some point would like a linebacker that can cover. Pace is terrible against the pass. I don't know if I go terrible. He graded okay his first year, struggled his second year. He has limitations. I would put it maybe that way. If they get a Jalen Walker and it's another guy who can rush the passer, like I would just gesture at Eagles. Like they just keep drafting front seven players and it's awesome for them. And if you're drafting DTs and guys who can rush the passer, like it's always going to be hard for me to say no to that. One Before I Die says, what's the earliest you could see Minnesota taking a running back? Feels like it'll be a really good one if available in the third. Third is possible. I might go fifth. I might go undrafted free agent because this year UDFA running back might be the same as drafting one in the fourth before. There's so many good ones. Third, you could probably get a normal second round draft pick just because the top ones are so good. I wouldn't be against them taking one in the third. You could probably get an elite talent. Alvin Kamara was a third round pick. Dalvin was a second rounder. Mixon, Taylor, those are second rounders, but those are of the caliber of prospect that we see. Maybe Mixon and Cook were a little bit higher than some of these guys, but guys who are projected to be in the third are really good. K Fowl thinks they're taking Kenneth Grant. Don't disagree with that. Would really like that if they took Kenneth Grant. I do think that Grant needs to develop the pass rush, but he could contribute right away as a run stuffer and then rotate in and grow and build on that, and could be a dominant run stuffer pretty quickly. Bernie Mac says, are there ideal scheme fits on offense and defense? Yeah, I think so. Now, the one that I don't know is if you're drafting a guard, I don't know if they're going to totally overhaul the run game or not. I get the sense that they are, but I don't know that. If they stick with the run game they currently use, Gray Zabel's a good pick for them. If they totally change it, then maybe Tyler Booker is. On defense, I think scheme fit comes down to just versatility. I don't think you can have one-dimensional people play on this defense very well. You're just not going to get the most out of them. So, let's see. Jared says, people in the NFL have always acted like you have to be near 100 years old and have 60 years experience in order to do anything in the upper ranks. Always thought that was stupid. Yeah, I think it's really cleared out over the last few years, but there's always been a little bit of that old boys club. And it's not just the old people. It's also you get hired as a GM, there's going to be bad feelings from people probably internally. There's going to be bad feelings from people who think they should have gotten considered if they didn't and stuff like that. So, I think when someone is different, like Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, there's always going to be people that want to second guess them because they didn't take the same traditional type of route there. Son of a Beavers, when do you think CJ Beathard signs and why will he become the best QB2 of all time? Is this CJ Beathard? Is that you, Son of Beavers? I mean, he's been in that kind of system before. That is a little bit where I draw the line, because my whole thing is like, I don't care. They just get it back up, whatever. I do kind of draw the line at CJ Beathard. If it's anything worse than that, then you're probably in trouble. But that's where Nick Mullins was. Helped him get JJ McCarthy, honestly. Randall says Noel Williams is a good cornerback in the third. Thought Dane Brugler and Daniel Jeremiah said he should be top 75. Productive. That's a college that people go to school at Cal, not always necessarily just for football. So I'm always interested if there's somebody who stands out from those colleges, like Noel Williams. I like that. Steven says, with Carr a no-show for New Orleans at their OTAs, they could go Shedeur at number 9, which could push Dart, Milrow, and I don't even know how to say the other guy's name. I haven't looked at him at all. Tyler, is it Show? Up the board a bit in round 1, which could bode well for the Vikings trading down. So this is the crazy thing about the quarterback situation. If you told me that 4 quarterbacks went in the first, I'd be like, oh, wow, okay. I guess somebody really bought into Dart and Milrow. Interesting. If you told me 1 quarterback went in the first, I'd be like, okay, I can see why nobody would really buy into Dart and Milrow. Traditionally speaking, guys like Dart and Milrow are second-round draft picks. They're not usually first-round picks. But there's more desperation here than maybe ever. I would not lock in that New Orleans takes Shedeur at number 9. Here's why. Their head coach is a first-year head coach. He does not have the pressure to turn around the entire franchise today. And and the Vikings got into this a little bit with, should they draft Malik Willis? And KOC is like, no. Should they draft Will Levis? No. Right? Like they didn't have the pressure to take the quarterback with the young coach in Kevin O'Connell, and they didn't reach on a guy they didn't want. So if, Shedeur Sanders isn't the guy they want, then they won't take him. Let's see. Gary says, don't want the Vikings to trade the 24th pick. Take Zabel, Jackson, Booker, Harmon, Grant, Eminware if they're there at 24. So the thing about that is, and I've run into the same thing, Gary, myself. I've said the exact same thing. I've said, look, if this guy, and this guy are there, then you just take them. And then I'm like, wait, that's a lot of guys. So trade down. If there's 5 guys they like, try to trade down. All right, we're getting close. I know behind the scenes here, Clay is just losing his mind. He wants to jump in and he wants to get his mock draft known to the world. Our first ever of all time intern mock. That's how well Intern Clay has been doing. There's jealousy among former interns. It's turned ugly. really, to tell you the truth. But we're doing it in just moments. Blowfish says Hunter was a run stopper in college and sack artist in the NFL. It's rare that that happens, but yeah, that is true. It's rare that that happens. And that is what's concerning to me about Walter Nolan is that doesn't always happen. In fact, it mostly doesn't happen. If a guy doesn't grade well as a pass rusher in college, then he usually doesn't in the NFL. Kenny's Playhouse, I don't know what that is, Kenny, says, do you think that Kwesi is hiding something regarding the QB plan? Seems off they didn't reach out to Joe Flacco. I mean, hiding something meaning like he's just not going to tell us who they're getting until it's solidified. Like that is kind of, I don't think there's something to it. Like, I'm not going to tell you some secret, but clearly there's a plan to get a backup quarterback. And they're either waiting to trade for one or they are waiting to sign Carson Wentz or whoever else is still out there. It's very few people. Those are really the only two options. So I'm expecting one of them to happen. But if they don't, if they just leave Brett Rippon, I don't know. He's played, I think, 4 NFL games, maybe 1, 2 of them. Didn't look that great, but they like him. Whoever your backup quarterback is not going to be good enough to save your bacon. There's probably 5 backups in the league that are good enough to do that. You know, they had Nick Mullins, Josh Dobbs. It's really of that level of backup. What you need is them to maybe survive a few games. But that's why I don't get too worked up about it, because there's just so few of those guys. Sue says, what would be a trade up scenario and how much would they give up to move? I don't see it happening, but you never know. It would have to be reaching into next year if they were going to trade up. Okay, I'll give you one. Is let's just say that Mason Graham or Will Campbell shockingly falls. Dallas Turner did last year, and those guys are suddenly available. I mean, I don't know, at 14. Okay. Grab a next year's second or something and try to move up and grab one of those guys because they could be such big impact players if you put Will Campbell at guard or Mason Graham. Only those 2 guys, I think, are really the ones you would do it for. I can't really think of a trade-up scenario that would be worth it otherwise. Caleb says, is there a starting left guard at number 97? Probably. I mean, probably someone you can develop into starting left guard. Tate Ratledge is the one that I've got my eye on. There's a few guys. Dylan Fairchild is another one. Just listen to these guard names. Dylan Fairchild. But yeah, like there's guys out there who you could pick in the 3rd and develop. It hasn't been a great model for this team, though. I mean, Wyatt Davis, Drew Samia, but there's decent prospects. I don't think it's a great guard draft, though. Jared says, I know this is a neck roll type thinking. Well, I'll decide that. I'll be the judge of that, Jared. I wouldn't mind 2 linebackers, maybe a priority UDFAs. All right, fair enough. You're asking about UDFA linebackers. That's a neck roll. Coverage guy and an old school thumper just for certain packages. Depth, they have Eric Wilson. So depth is definitely something that they're going to need from undrafted free agents. I guarantee that they will get some depth at in the undrafted free agent market at the linebacker position. I would agree. It's pronounced Shock, huh? The quarterback. That's great. Well, I don't really give a shock about him. Come on, right? About him because the Vikings aren't going to be interested. And I also think this just seems like the year, and maybe I'll be wrong. It just feels like the year that they're going to talk about these guys and they're going to go in the 5th. Like it's a bunch of Spencer Rattlers from last year. Shock to me seems like a 5th round pick where everyone's like, no, I loved him. I loved his tape. And you're like, okay, he's 25 years old. He's not that good. Like, I don't know. I don't think so. We'll see. Anyway, it's time now for the first ever of all time in the history of Purple Insider interns, of which there has been 2 before Clay, that Intern Clay gets to reveal a full first round mock draft. So Clay, I know you're excited. You're jacked up. I was trying to speed run through questions just to get to this mock. And, you know, you're on the East Coast. Why you stay up too late? Your mom watches. So here's how I want to do this, Clay. I want you to run through your like we'll go 5 picks at a time so we could get to 24 pretty quickly and we could talk about what you think the Vikings are going to do. And I'll put it on the screen at the end. I've got that ready for the screen share, so I'll put that on the screen when it's ready. So let's just start it off with your first 5 picks in the NFL draft in the first ever intern mock. And Randall is comparing it to the moon landing. I think it's bigger, Randall. I think it's bigger. Let's not downplay how important this is. So, Clay, just fire it up.
Yep. It's an honor to be here. Privileged to have the title as first in Purple Insider intern history, even though there's definitely some legends in that group. So I'm ready to get into it. With my first pick in the mock draft, I got Cam Ward. I feel like that's a pretty self-explanatory pick. Next up, I have the Browns taking who I think is the best player of the draft. I'm going Travis Hunter at 2. And then Giants at 3. I think it's Abdul Carter. I feel like him and Hunter are very interchangeable. And then number 4, I think the Patriots build up their O-line and go Will Campbell. And then at 5, I have the Jaguars taking the best defensive player available here with Mason Graham.
Okay, so you went very chalky in the first 5 picks, and Steven is asking if you're allowed to make trades. I was like, I don't want to get it too complicated here. Let's just, and also I don't expect there to be a lot of trades. It doesn't seem like there's going to be much in the first round, as has been pointed out numerous times, but it almost never happens that every team has their pick, but they do this year. So Cam Ward, Travis Hunter to the Browns, Abdul Carter, Will Campbell going to the Patriots, Mason Graham to the Jaguars. I would say every single mock has this, and it'll probably be right or some extremely close version unless Cleveland takes Carter and then the Giants take Travis Hunter. I look at these players as being some of the very, very few in this draft that are franchise type of players, and there's still some questions about them. Ward, I'm not totally sold on. Will Campbell and his little tiny arms. Mason Graham is really impressive, but is he going to be like a next level type of guy? I'm not sure about that. The only one that I'd say, Clay, I'm a little bit less clear on is the Jags, because I think they could go Jags. Like, they're the Jags. Like, they could do anything here. They could go Genty. They could go Membu. They could do something wild here. That's the only team that I think maybe has a surprise in for us. And I would say also New England, if they like Armand Membu more than Will Campbell, they could do that. And that's why I was mentioning there is a scenario where the NFL just doesn't see Will Campbell as a tackle and totally surprises us, and he's taken like 12th or something.
Yeah, I agree. I think Campbell and Membu are likely the top 2 offensive linemen in this draft, and I could really see the Patriots going with whichever one they like more. It's just everything I've been seeing is kind of leading Campbell to the Patriots, so I just stuck him there. And then Mason Graham, Jaguars have so many holes to fix and problems to solve. I think it's just he seems like the best available option besides Genty, but they're not in position to take a running back. I think in order to take a running back this high, you kind of have to have your solid your base solidified, and I think they still have a lot of work to go.
Yeah, the only reason I brought that up is just Jags. Like, otherwise, no other team would be thinking that. But they need everything on defense. That defense was pretty bad. Jared points out the Jags have a new GM. That is true. And maybe he won't be a crazy person. So, like their last one. All right, picks 6 through 10. What do we got for picks 6 through 10?
So pick 6, I have the Raiders taking Ashton Genty. And then at pick 7, I have the Jets solidifying their offensive line with Armand Membu. And then at 8, this one is a little debatable. I had the Panthers taking Tyler Warren. I feel like Bryce Young he needs to have a good year this season. I think it's very important for the Panthers franchise going forward. So I think he's the best weapon on the board at this point. So I say take Tyler Warren. Number 9, I have the Saints taking Jihad Campbell. I don't have them taking Shedeur Sanders and panicking. I think they'll take a versatile linebacker that can kind of play all over the field. And then pick 10, probably my least favorite pick of the draft. I had the Bears taking Malachi Starks.
Oh, interesting. Okay, they go with a safety. as opposed to maybe an edge rusher, which I was kind of thinking that they might go there. So you have Genty to the Raiders. Pete Carroll, he needs weapons right away. He loves to run the football. Makes sense. Who cares about the Jets? The Panthers one, I think they'll go defense on this. I totally feel your logic on that. More weapons. They were really short on weapons overall, and I wouldn't be totally shocked if they took Tet McMillan or Tyler Warren. I think is just high for them. Probably Jahad Campbell to the Saints. They need football players, and I'm with you. I just don't think they're going to freak out and draft a guy that they don't love with a new coach. That seems like something that a coach on the hot seat would do, or a GM on the hot. Well, maybe their GM is on the hot seat actually, but that seems like something a coach would sign off on only if he's panicking and wants to give himself more time. And why did you go Malachi Starks so high for the Chicago Bears?
Yeah, I I think they should have their eye on either Campbell, Membu, or Genty. But in this situation, all of those guys are off the board, and you could take your choice of D tackles, but then that might be too high also for a guy like Walter Nolan or Derek Harmon, and then maybe even Kelvin Banks. But again, so many mock drafts have him going early or super late in the first, so it's hard to kind of gauge how NFL teams are viewing him. So I just figured they'll take one of the best players available. Kevin Byard's aging, so Starks could take over when he retires, and then Jaquan Brisker is always running into injuries, so he could fill in there too if needed.
Well, their secondary does need a lot of work. They do have the weapons. They stacked up the offensive line, and I just think they need defensive talent. And the NFL is reportedly very high on Malachi Starks, so that one's not crazy here. Let's get to the next run of picks, and again, I'll show the whole thing when it's done. I don't want to spoil it as we count it down, but let's go 11 through 15 here.
Yep. So 11, I have the 49ers taking Will Johnson. And then at 12, I have the Cowboys taking Tet McMillan. At 13, I have the Dolphins taking my favorite corner in the draft, Jahdae Barron. And then at 14, I have the Colts taking Jalen Walker. Originally, I was thinking more O-line because they shipped out Ryan Kelly and Will Fries. But I just don't think there's many guys on the board that would be reasonable at 14. So I see them taking Jalen Walker here who could complement either Latu off the edge or Zaire Franklin in the box or in the linebacking squad. And then 15, I have Falcons taking Mike Green.
There's a couple here that are kind of obvious because they have to be. And maybe these teams will surprise us on draft night, but it just makes way too much sense for Will Johnson. They just lost Charvarius Ward. They need corners. San Francisco, Tet McMillan to the Cowboys. That they need more weapons. They have one guy who is a difference maker. Barron to Miami. Miami is a team. It's so funny how fast you could go from genius to dope. And Miami 2 years ago is like, wow, man, Mike McDaniel, they're so genius. Tua is so awesome now. And then all of a sudden, Tyreek Hill has got some questions there. And their GM is talking the other day about their leadership core and doesn't mention Tua. And they are maybe going to trade Jalen Ramsey, which, by the way, my answer is no, thank you. I'm good. I would not be doing that if you're the Minnesota Vikings. 30-year-old corners who've just been through it. I don't think that's what they're looking for. So if they are trading Ramsey, or even the fact that they're talking about Ramsey being traded, does kind of indicate a corner. So I like that pick. I don't care about the Colts and the Falcons. They need pass rush. They have a pathetic defense. So Mike Green makes a lot of sense. And that's why when Kwesi says you earn the right to just draft impact players, it's like Falcons have not done that. And San Francisco has not done that. But especially the Falcons have to draft a pass rusher. They've got nothing. Matthew Judon did nothing for them. So they're desperate. I think that's a good pick. Let's go 16 through 20 or so. Let's go 16 through 20, and then we can make the countdown a little more dramatic to the Vikings pick. So who do you got 16 through 20?
Yep. So at 16, I have the Cardinals surprisingly taking Matthew Golden. I was thinking some other positions here, maybe a lineman, because they don't have a standout offensive lineman, but they have a good unit. So I think Golden would be a good addition to their offense and adding some much needed speed over there. And number 17, I don't really know who this guy is, honestly. Donovan Azuruaku from Boston College.
Ezuraku, I believe it is.
Ezuraku. He had 16.5 sacks last year, and Bengals, if they ship out Hendrickson, they're going to need to replace him. But even if they don't, they're going to need some more defensive players to bolster that unit. At 18,
That is, I'm sorry, but that is the first time anyone has actually been honest about that when they put in somebody for a mock. I don't really know this guy, but that's who they'll probably take.
There's some player. I can't keep track of everybody. You know, I'm a college kid. I try my best, but you know, some slip through the cracks.
I haven't. If the Vikings draft an edge rusher, I'm going to be scrambling on draft night because I haven't looked at these guys really at all. But I will say, in a mock for teams we don't care that much about, like Cincinnati, you're just looking to pair them with someone who makes sense. There's a clear issue with Trey Hendrickson there. It looks like they're going to have to trade him. So Ezuraku makes sense. So did you say who Seattle was picking yet?
So at 18, I have Seattle taking Gray Zabel. I think their interior line just needs so much work. And then 19, the Bucs take Michael Williams. And then at 20, I have the Broncos going Emeka Egbuka.
Okay. So the edge rusher goes to the Bucs. I think they need that position. And the Broncos definitely need weapons for Bo Nix. He really didn't have a lot to work with last year. So now we are down to the picks 21 through 25, right before the Minnesota Vikings. And so what I want you to do is take us to 23, and then we could talk about the players on the board, and we can really break it down for like who you picked for the Vikings, but also what their options are in this first time ever Purple Insider intern mock. So take us to 23.
Yep. So at 21, I have the Steelers landing Shedeur Sanders.
Okay.
I think he will slide this far. And I just think it's a perfect fit for them. I think he has the weapons there. He's a top-tier head coach in Mike Tomlin. For a quarterback with question marks, you need to go somewhere with a solid system. So I feel like that works out for him. At 22, I have the Chargers taking Colston Loveland. The Chargers need more offensive weapons, and I think Harbaugh reunites with his Michigan guy.
Okay.
Then at 23, I have the Packers taking Luther Burden. I feel like I've been screaming at them to make a move for a receiver all offseason, and I think they're finally going to do it. And I think he's the best receiver at this spot.
And Luther Burden is a yards after catch type of wide receiver. Matt LaFleur loves to dial up quick stuff to his wide receivers. That's why they like Jaden Reed so much. I mean, Luther Burden is kind of Jaden Reed. It's a very similar type player who can make plays down the field if they're called upon, but really it's the ball in their hands. Maybe they're looking for somebody a little different than that, like a Matthew Golden, but I definitely see the fit with how they play. So here's what's on the board for the other players in your mock that were drafted in the first. We'll talk about some other guys potentially too. Let's see, just to randomly name other players who are available and not give away your pick. Derek Harmon is here. Kenneth Grant is here. Maxwell Harrison is here. He's a good cornerback. Kelvin Banks is one that you did not have drafting high, which I would be very potentially interested in. Pretty much any corner that they want is on the board here, except for Jahdae Barron, Will Johnson, and Travis Hunter, which is intriguing. And pretty much every defensive tackle at all is on the board, right? I don't think there's, other than Mason Graham, there's no other defensive tackle. So they have their pick of the litter here. This is why every single mock ends up with, should probably trade down, because look at all of these players that they could potentially pick. So with all that in consideration, who did you decide to select for the Minnesota Vikings?
Yeah, at first, for a while now, I've been on the Vikings need to draft a corner kind of bandwagon. I like Isaiah Rodgers as a player, but I don't know if I believe him enough to be an every down kind of player. So I was looking at Trey Amos, Maxwell Hairston, but I eventually settled on Walter Nolan. It was really, him and Harmon are so hard to choose between. But I think Nolan has the highest upside for pass rushing. I know Harmon might be in a better spot now, but I think the Vikings brought in Jonathan Allen and Hargrave, two guys who know how to get after the passer, and I think they're going to look for that trait more and more.
So this is, I think, the position that I would go with as well. I like Harmon a little bit more, but look, I mean, it's like I said earlier, there's a red flag statistically for me on Nolan. He really only produced for 1 year. His pass rush grade is significantly lower than some of the best guys in the NFL. But also, he is crazy explosive, which that and power, you can't just invent. You either have those or you don't. And if they're looking for someone who can develop over a couple years behind two really good defensive tackles, it makes a lot of sense. These are slight different preferences. I went through this last year with JJ McCarthy, where when we talked about the different quarterbacks, we picked apart every part of them. And I said McCarthy was one that kind of concerned me or scared me the most because of the smaller sample. And some people took that as to be the like, oh, you hate McCarthy? Like, of course not. Whatever quarterback they take, I'm going to be thrilled about because we've been waiting for this forever. It's the same kind of thing with the DT. I think it's such an important position and so valuable that if they take one, I'll be like, okay, good. If it's Kenneth Grant, he's a little less on the pass rush side, but high on the upside and could be elite against the run. Like, yes, go ahead and do that. So I like this pick, and I think probably now is a good time to show the entire first round because no one cares about the rest of the picks, but we'll run through them quickly. So yeah, here we go. We're blocking out the rest of the picks. How do I move us around from that? Let's, can we put us here? There we go. There we go. So you could see, and I'll make this a little bit bigger. Can everybody see the picks now? Okay. Sort of. Hopefully everyone can see the picks. Maybe I'll just put the whole thing there. There you go. Hopefully you could see all the picks there. If you can't see them perfectly, here's how it went. Josh Simmons to the Texans. My gosh, yes, they need that. Maxwell Harrison to the Rams. A speedy corner. Interested to see if people buy into that speed. Kenneth Grant goes to Baltimore in the first ever intern mock. Derek Harmon to the Detroit Lions. Don't love that because he's good. O'Marion Hampton to Washington like that. James Pierce. I don't get it with James Pierce. Kelvin Banks to Kansas City and Shamar Stewart to Philly in a very fitting pick. So you can take a look at those. And once again, I'm sort of blocking it. There we go. Take a look at those. And those are the first ever intern mock of all time. So great job, Clay. I think you did really well being interesting in a mock. You have to go a little bit off sometimes on certain picks and so forth, but also nailing the right types of needs for a lot of different teams. So that was good. I like where the Vikings pick was. And I just think it continues to tell you, no matter how you do it, because you threw some curveballs in there, no matter how you do it, there's so many guys there that Vikings fans would be happy with and I think could be very good contributors to their team right away and then develop into the future.
Yeah, I agree. I would not be shocked to see just a few teams make that trade back. Even if that situation plays out for Chicago, I wouldn't be surprised if they try and move back into like the teens to try and land a O lineman or an edge that they feel like is a better spot to select them at. So I feel like there's a few spots there. So it'll be fun to see how it turns out.
Steve says, make sure we revisit post-draft and see how accurate you were. And well, you know, the answer is no one's mock ever turns out to be 100%. And this one, we could see a lot of different players. Right?
I'm going 32 for 32.
32 for 32. Okay. Yeah. We'll see how that ends up playing out. What else? Is there anything else on your mind, Clay, before we call it an evening? I talked about a lot of stuff, answered a lot of questions, and I know you got thoughts. Anything you're thinking about?
No, but you called the Chicago secondary a little lackluster, which was I don't really agree with. I think their box is where they need to improve. But I love Kyler Gordon, Jalen Johnson, and Jaquan Brisker when he's healthy. And so I think they need to continue to fill the box. This is why I don't love the Starks pick, but who knows?
You're the one that picked a defensive back for them.
Yep.
So
yeah, and I still hate it.
I mean, Jalen Johnson's a great player. Kyler Gordon's a good player. Brisker, just what's the health situation? I mean, it always seems to be something with him where when I see him actually play, then he's good. But if there's concerns long-term for him health-wise, then Malachi Starks does make a lot of sense. I mean, when it comes to the rest of the NFC North, the Chicago Bears are the biggest question mark for this draft, right? I mean, I think we've gotten to the point with the Packers where if they don't pick a wide receiver, we are all going to laugh at the Green Bay Packers. Just be like, what does it take for you guys to take a wide receiver? But Detroit can kind of do whatever they want. They don't really have major weaknesses. They can continue to stack up the D line, but they're back end of the first. It's really the Chicago pick that if Genty gets there, well, then, that's pretty interesting. And I think
That would be my favorite.
I was talking to somebody in the league the other day. Let's just say an NFC North source who said that they don't want the Bears to get Ashton Genty because if it was any other team, okay, maybe it turns out like Bijan Robinson or something, but with Ben Johnson, that is not who you want to see. And the way that they have built that offensive line is to run the ball. Genty is one of the biggest questions here in the entire draft. Is somebody going that high with a running back? Is Pete Carroll, is their new general manager? We don't know what their new general manager is thinking. Or are we going to be surprised? And we're going to all think, oh, well, since Saquon ran for 2,000 yards, now everybody wants running backs. And then we're going to find out, actually, maybe they didn't as much as picking them that high in the draft.
Yeah, as a Bears fan, I hope he gets to 10. It gets past the Raiders. I just think we've seen the Raiders before with an elite running back with nothing around him. Josh Jacobs was running like crazy for the Raiders, and they were still losers. So I think they should probably look to other positions. Like I said earlier, running back is really a position where I feel like if you draft early, the rest of your team needs to be solidified. And the running back is kind of the final cherry on top. That's why I think Commanders could take Amari and Hampton. It would be perfect for them. So yeah, I think Ashton Genty with Ben Johnson would be really scary. And if the revamped O-line works, it could be even scarier.
We are just days away, my friends, and did another breakdown with Emily Liker of the Star Tribune. If you want to check that out, another video that's on the page. Right after Kwesi's press conference, we had a fun conversation there. And for Monday, Clay, let's figure out how to have the most fun we can have, because there is pretty much nothing left to be said, but there are always some last minute rumors or moves or something that tend to surprise us. So we'll see what is on the way. It feels like we've got this all figured out. And then on draft night, we'll throw lots of curveballs. But a reminder, and I'll mention this every day from here on out, draft night, I will be right here. Clay will be in his behind the scenes role, popping in, giving us updates on how the board compares to consensus boards. And then we'll, just have you pop in and do different breakdowns and stuff as we go through draft night. But I will be on from the beginning of the draft all the way through the first round, whether the Vikings make a pick or not. And we'll see about day 2. If they trade back into the second round, we'll definitely live stream in day 2 as well. So Clay, I look forward to that. Your first draft, we'll compare it to your mock, and we will go from there. But lots still to come on the show. So make sure you're dialed in. Next Monday will be the next time I plan on live streaming. You never know when something comes up. I guess if they sign a backup quarterback, I'm going to have to go emergency pod. It's been such a point of discussion. So thank you for your time as always, Clay.
Thank you. Football.
Oh no, I hit the button just as he was saying football. Sorry, Clay. Hold on. Go ahead.
Thank you. Football.
All right. Okay, everybody. Thanks again for watching. As always, fun show. Great questions, great comments. PurpleInsider.football to check out Friday mailbag. I'm also answering a bunch of questions that Vikings fans started out with, am I crazy? We're going to be doing that soon. Clay is going to have an article about why he loves the draft. So it's a good time to talk about football. Thanks again, everybody, and we'll talk to you all very soon. Football.